Thinking about ditching the dye? Not sure where to get started? This video is for you. Hello silver friends, or soon to be silver friends. This is Jolie from 𝐓𝐫𝐚𝐲, and today I'm going to share with you the top 10 ways to transition to gray hair. I have found that some of these are easier than others, but I wanted to put in one place all the ways that I have found through all the years that I've been doing this that people have chosen to transition to gray. Now, I'm sure I'll probably miss some because this is obviously the top 10, but if it sounds interesting to you, let's get started. So I'm ranking these choices from the fastest, cheapest, and easiest to the most expensive and longest ways to go gray. I feel like there is no wrong way to do this. You have to do it the way that's right for you, but I wanted to give you all the different ways. Maybe there's some new ones in here that you haven't heard of, and they might help you with picking the method you would like to pick for your journey to your silver hair. The first is to shave your head. Not everybody can make this choice. Not everybody has what they consider to be the bone structure or the skin tone to, shave their head. But I commend you if you can shave your head, because literally you have stripped away all the dye in one fell swoop and you never have to look at it again, and then you just get to grow your hair out from there to your preferred length. You do have to wait to grow your hair out, of course, but it does get you there the fastest. The second fastest way is to cut your hair as short as possible into a pixie cut. There are many people that cannot pull off a pixie cut, so this may not be for you if you don't feel like you can have your hair super short. But I think pixie cuts are super cute, and if you can, it's one of the easiest ways to deal with the transition process because your demarcation line stays pretty narrow. So if you can do it, go for it, because it's a real quick way to the end. Again, if you don't prefer your hair to stay in a pixie, the downside is the grow out process of a pixie can be, stressful. But at least once you're growing it out, you're only growing out the silver and not silver and dye. The third method is to throw out that box and go cold turkey. It's pretty simple. It's just that. You just decide that that's all you're going to do to your hair and go from there. There are many people that choose this option because it is the least damaging and sometimes the least stressful. A lot of people prefer the cold turkey method because they can actually embrace their silver hair slowly and learn to love it. I consider, cold turkey method kind of like opening a gift very slowly, and I kind of wish it was the way I had gone about my grow out, because I think I would have had an easier time not messing around the way I did with the different methods that I tried to help the process along. And I like to remind people that the more you mess around, the more you keep trying to pick this thing or that thing or this thing or that thing, the more you elongate the process. So do pick that method and stick to it. I just did a video where I talk about that, and I will link it up here so that you can check that out. But cold turkey is a pretty common way to go. Now, cold turkey can be combined with a couple of things like touching up your ends as you go along, which is number 4, and that is to add color to your ends. So you can, if you've got longer hair, this is a little bit easier to do. You can add the color that you had been adding just to keep it fresh. You can match to your darker color that remains, that is your natural darker color, so that it just kind of blends all in together. I wish that that is what I had done, because my dye was red, and as it faded, it got very coppery. And if I had chosen to dye it this color of the brown and match that, it probably would have looked a little better throughout the process, but c'est la vie. I did it the way I did it. Anyway, I've seen many people go through this process cold turkey and just touch up that dye to keep it from getting brassy or faded looking, and it makes the process look more intentional, and it looks like a reverse ombre. Number 5 is to have some sort of blending process, and this can involve lowlights, highlights, a combination of highlights and lowlights, or double lowlights, which is what I chose to do. At about month 5, I went in and had a gal match the red that it was on my ends. So that was one of my lowlights, and the other lowlight was to match the darker color coming in. The downside of this for me is that while she tried not to touch my roots, she did actually end up going to the root line. So I kind of got set back a little bit just on those low light colored pieces. So, you know, consider this. And if you do highlights, remember that they will go a yellowy tone, so you'll have to keep those toned as you grow your hair out, or be prepared to have those yellowy tones mixed into your grow out. Number 6 is something that I actually did in the very beginning, and that was that I started this process at the age of 37. I chose to pull out my white streak here, and then I dyed all the way around it and grew my white streak all the way out. So this actually helped me because as my demarcation line was growing out, I already had this long white streak that kind of from the front was that money piece, and you really weren't paying much attention to that demarcation line, especially since it was mixed in with my curls. So it did help me ease that process a little bit. So if you know you have a white streak and you want to just see what it looks like, you can have your stylist do what I did, and that is she pulled out the section that we thought was white. We actually pulled out a section that was too small. It needed to be a larger section, and she highlighted it. And then I just avoided coloring that section of hair when I touched up my roots. And over time it grew out and I had a white streak for a while, which I loved. It was kind of the rogue white against my red hair. If I ever dyed my hair again, I probably would isolate my white streak and keep it that way, because my white hair really didn't hold the dye. And that's kind of where you can tell if you've got a white streak. If you've been dyeing your hair for a long time and you're not really sure, it's probably that area that 4 days after you dye your hair is white again. It does double the process because you have to grow out that streak, rock it for however long you want to, and then grow out the rest of your dyed hair. However, it's a great little way to kind of break up the demarcation line, especially around your face. Number 7, along the same vein, is the dye strip technique. This technique was first described by a lady named Suzanne Barnes on YouTube, and now Katie of 𝐘𝐨𝐿 has a full video on it of one of her followers that chose to use the dye strip technique. But basically it's the opposite of what I did. Is you take a streak of hair, usually through your part line, and you continue to dye that hair and let it lay over your gray hair as it grows out. And then once your gray hair is grown out underneath that dyed strip, you can, at whatever point you feel comfortable, stop dyeing it and let it grow out. Again, this kind of doubles the process depending on when you choose to completely ditch the dye altogether. But it can be a great way to camouflage the gray as it grows out. If you're interested in the dye strip technique, I will link Suzanne's video below and 𝐘𝐨𝐿 video in the description box below, so you can go see how that all works. Number 8 is another half and half kind of method. I actually considered doing this and I chose not to, but basically you can either choose to dye the crown. You can pick your whole crown and dye that whole thing and let the gray grow out underneath. Or you can do the reverse, dye your nape, dye everything underneath and let it stay dyed and let the top grow out over it. That's not a very common choice because you're still not really hiding the grow out, but you are keeping color kind of fresh if it's underneath. And you get that, you remember in the 90s when people would bleach the top of their hair and dye the underneath dark? You get that kind of look, and that can be fun for some people depending on what their natural hair color actually is and how that blends together. But anyway, that's, you know, kind of a half and half method where you pick which half you want to keep dyeing and continue dyeing it. I've also seen recently where people are dyeing half of their head one color and leaving the other half to grow out, and then flipping their hair over and having, you know, the dyed hair on one side or the silver hair on one side. Another way to kind of camouflage it. Number 9, of course, which is the most expensive, the most damaging, and the longest process you'll go through, is to do an overnight transition with salon help. This can involve several different types of processing. It can sometimes involve many, many hours and many, many dollars thrown at the process. For me, personally, I don't like to see people do this because it is so incredibly damaging. I know that it is your choice, and if you need to do it, I completely understand, because some of us cannot stand the demarcation line. We can't stand all that grow out. But the downside to this is it is very damaging, and you still have to grow off all of that hair, and you have to maintain that bleached processed hair with some toners to keep it from going a real straw-like yellow color. So be prepared for that. And I really highly suggest you find a stylist that 100% knows how to work with that hair for the graying process. Not somebody that just knows how to do highlights. You want somebody that really fully understands some of these new dyes that are meant to make it look silver. And hopefully you can find somebody like that around you that can protect your hair also, because I think a stylist should sit you down in a chair, evaluate your hair, and decide whether or not your hair can actually handle that processing. Because some hair types cannot handle that much bleaching and you will end up with a chemical haircut, which is one of the reasons that I feel like it's something that people should really be careful about choosing, because not only is it expensive, it can be expensive to your physical because you could lose your hair. So be really careful and make sure that whoever you see knows what they are doing, because that's the worst thing that can happen, is to have made this decision and then end up with a chemical haircut and you're starting back with a pixie cut. Number 10 is to secretly go gray with a wig or a topper, where you wear your gray hair growing out under one of those pieces so that no one knows what's going on and no one sees it until you're ready to reveal it. I feel like this one's kind of a fun one if you can handle wearing wigs, because you don't have to worry about any of the issues that we've just discussed. You just get to let it grow out in peace and quiet with nobody seeing it and no worries. And you get to have some fun with some wigs. There is a corresponding blog post to this video where I go into great detail and give you all the information plus photos from wonderful silver friends who allowed me to post those on my blog of their transition. And I hope you go check it out. It's in the description box below. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please share this video. And while you're down there, subscribe if you haven't already, because I would love to see you next time. And until then, shine on.